My future ended the moment my fiance's mother held my soul between her thumb and forefinger, and the man I loved, the man I was going to marry, said absolutely nothing. My life with a Montgomery was never supposed to be my reality. I met Julian Montgomery during a sweltering September heatwave in a packed art history lecture at Brown University. He was the golden son of a gilded dynasty, the kind of family whose name you see etched into the marble lobbies of hospitals and museums. They didn't just summer in Nantucket, they owned a stretch of coastline there that was visible from space. Julian was everything that came with the name, effortlessly charming, whip-smart, with a casual grace that spoke of a life lived without friction. And then there was me, Clara. I came from a small, two-bedroom house in Providence that always smelled faintly of burned sugar and my mother's tireless optimism. She was a single mom who worked double shifts as a pastry chef, a woman whose strength was the only inheritance she had to give me. She taught me that an object's true worth wasn't in its price tag, but in the love and labor poured into it. Her sudden death from a heart attack during my sophomore year had left a crater in my life so vast I was still navigating its edges. All I had left of her were the lessons and the quiet fierceness she'd instilled in me. When I told Julian about my life, about my mom, he was so gentle. "Clara, that's the last thing that matters to me," he had said, his deep blue eyes sincere. "I'm falling for you, not your zip code." For 2 years, I wrapped myself in those words. I believed our love was strong enough to bridge the chasm between our worlds. His family, however, saw that bridge and immediately set up a toll booth they had no intention of letting me pass. His mother, Catherine, was a woman of terrifying poise, her compliments so perfectly backhanded they could draw blood. "What a unique little dress," she would say, her eyes scanning the fabric of my department store find. "It's very spirited." His father, Robert, a titan of finance, communicated mostly through long, assessing silences that felt heavier than any criticism. And his younger sister, Victoria, treated me with the bored disdain one might reserve for a fly buzzing near their champagne flute, making cutting remarks about me to her mother as if I were deaf. But I fought for it. For Julian, I studied their world with the intensity of a grad student cramming for finals. I learned the difference between Bordeaux and Burgundy. I memorized the names of the charities they chaired, and I smiled through endless discussions about yachting regattas and corporate acquisitions. I weathered Catherine's probing questions about my background. "Your mother must have been so resilient," she once noted, making the word sound like a synonym for poor. Every time I felt the facade cracking, Julian would be there, his hand finding mine, his thumb drawing slow circles on my skin. "Don't listen to them," he'd whisper. "They're just old-fashioned. They'll come around. I love you." I clung to his words like a life raft, pushing down the gnawing feeling that I was an actress in a play I hadn't been given the script for. This past Christmas was supposed to be the final act, the grand unveiling. Julian insisted I spend the entire holiday week at the family's palatial estate in the rolling hills of Virginia. "This is it, Clara," he'd promised, his face glowing with a naive certainty. "This is when they'll finally see you as one of us. This is our forever." A familiar anxiety coiled in my stomach, but the hope in his eyes was my favorite drug, so I packed my bags. The drive felt like ascending into another atmosphere. A private tree-lined road twisted for a mile before opening onto a brick mansion that looked less like a home and more like a private university. The air inside was still and smelled of fresh pine and old money. In the cavernous great room, a Christmas tree soared 2 stories high, adorned with what looked like hand-blown glass ornaments and ribbons of spun gold. It was a masterpiece of professional decoration, stunning and completely devoid of warmth. My childhood home had been a haven. This was a museum exhibit. Christmas with my mom was a festival of beautiful, joyous chaos. We'd bake for days, covering every surface in a fine dusting of flour. We'd string popcorn and cranberries for our small lopsided tree, singing carols off-key and at the top of our lungs. Her presents were the artifacts of my life, a wooden box she'd hand-painted with my favorite flowers, a framed photo of us laughing on the beach, a worn copy of her favorite book with her thoughts scrawled in the margins. This was the spirit I wanted to bring to the Montgomerys. It was the only currency I truly owned. I had spent a month on their gifts. For Catherine, a woman who owned everything, I commissioned a local potter to create a one-of-a-kind ceramic vase, its glaze the deep, stormy blue of a winter ocean. For Robert, a proud alumnus, I spent weeks in the university archives finding and framing a beautiful, rare photograph of the campus from the year he graduated. For Victoria, in a desperate reach for connection, I had found a small, independent jeweler who made delicate silver necklaces, and I'd chosen one with a tiny, intricate star, a nod to her love of astronomy. And for Julian, my fiancé, my whole world, I made a memory box. I'd found a beautiful antique wooden box and filled it with the story of us, the ticket stub from our first movie, a pressed wildflower from a hike we took in the Shenandoah Valley, a seashell from our first trip to the beach. On small, rolled-up scrolls, I wrote down the memories tied to each object. It was a testament to our love, built with the only tools my mother ever taught me to use: care, time, and heart. Christmas morning dawned not with laughter, but with a quiet, formal reverence, like a board meeting. We assembled in the living room, a space so vast it seemed to swallow sound. The floor was a sea of bags from Tiffany and Costine, boxes from Hermes, and envelopes containing stock certificates. They exchanged their presents with a detached politeness: a pearl necklace for Catherine, a first edition Hemingway for Robert, a custom-tailored equestrian jacket for Victoria. The air hummed with polite, empty thanks. Then it was my turn. My modestly wrapped presents looked like orphans next to their mountain of luxury. My hands were damp as I passed them out, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. A thick, expectant silence descended as they opened them. It wasn't the happy kind. It was the heavy silence of a jury about to deliver a verdict. Catherine lifted the ceramic vase from its box. She didn't turn it over in her hands or admire the unique glaze. She held it out in front of her, her lips pursed in a thin line of polite confusion. Victoria let out a single sharp burst of laughter when she saw the necklace. "Oh, that's sweet," she said, letting it dangle from her fingers for her mother to see. The word "sweet" was an insult. Robert gave the framed photograph a brief, dismissive glance. He arched a single brow, a silent question mark, before placing it face down on a side table with a soft, final thud. My eyes shot to Julian. He was staring at the open memory box on his lap. His face was blank. He wasn't smiling at the memories. He wasn't looking at me. He was just frozen, his gaze locked on the intricate pattern of the Persian rug. The silence was finally shattered by Catherine's voice, a sound like a silk scarf being used to strangle someone. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "how very quaint. You made these, I presume?" My throat closed. I managed a tight nod. My mom always believed the most valuable gifts are the ones that hold a piece of the giver. Victoria let out a little snort. "Well, that's one way to put it. I was going to guess they came from a local craft fair." A low chuckle came from Robert's armchair. "No offense, young lady," he said, addressing the ceiling, "but in this family, our gifts are investments. They appreciate in value. They're not arts and crafts projects." He waved a dismissive hand toward the designer bags. Catherine nodded, setting my vase down next to Robert's rejected photo, as if it were contagious. "The thought is charming, of course, very homespun," she said. "But you must understand our position, Clara. For us, perception is a form of currency. We must maintain a certain standard. Can you imagine the talk if one of my friends saw me wearing this?" Victoria giggled, dropping the necklace back into its box. "They'd think the Montgomery Fund was finally going under." The room was filled with their quiet, shared amusement. They were a united front, and I was the common enemy. This wasn't about a vase or a necklace. This was about me. They were scorning my mother's philosophy. They were laughing at the very soul of who I was, the love and the lessons that were her only legacy. They were laughing at her. My gaze found Julian again. I begged him with my eyes, "Say something. Defend me. Defend us. Show me I'm not standing here alone." But he remained a statue of shame. His jaw was a hard line, but his eyes stayed fixed on the floor. He would not look at me. And in that deafening, soul-splintering silence, the fairy tale shattered into a million pieces. He wasn't my protector. He was their son. I wasn't his future. I was his temporary diversion. And the man who had promised me the world was nothing but a coward, a silent conspirator as his family took a scalpel to my heart. He had never been on my team. He had just been waiting for me to forfeit and join his. A strange, breathtaking calm washed over me. The desperate need to be accepted, the years of anxiety, the constant fear of saying the wrong thing, it all dissolved. I took one slow, deep breath and stood up. The motion was so unexpected, it startled them into silence. "You're right," I said, my voice ringing clear and steady in the enormous room. "We are from different worlds." I looked directly at Catherine, the ice queen on her throne. "In my world, a gift isn't an asset. It's a piece of your heart. It says, 'I see you. I spent my time for you. You are important to me.'" I turned my head to Victoria. "In my world, we don't ridicule sincerity. We cherish it because we understand it's the rarest commodity of all." And then I faced him, the man I thought I loved. My voice dropped, thick with the weight of his betrayal. "And in my world, Julian, when the person you love is under attack, you don't just sit there and watch. You become their shield." He finally looked up, raw panic in his eyes. "Clara, don't! Not now! Not here!" I gave a short, decisive shake of my head. "No, you don't get to decide when my pain is convenient for you anymore." My hands were perfectly steady as I reached for my left. I twisted the diamond ring, the 2-carat symbol of a future that had just been proven a fraud, and slid it from my finger. It felt lighter than a feather. I walked to the polished mahogany coffee table, littered with their transactional tokens of affection, and I placed the ring down. It made a small, definitive click. "My audition is over," I said, my voice quiet but unshakable. I turned and walked away. I strode through the grand foyer, past the silent uniformed staff, grabbed my coat and my bag, and walked out the colossal front doors into the crisp, biting Virginia air. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I just walked. My heart was hammering, but for the first time in 2 years I could breathe. I heard the heavy door swing open behind me and Julian's voice, now desperate, calling my name. "Clara, wait! We can talk about this. You're being hysterical." I didn't break my stride. I got into my 10-year-old Honda, a car that suddenly felt like a chariot of liberation, and I started the engine. As I pulled away down that long, winding road, I was leaving behind a life of unimaginable wealth and suffocating judgment, but I was driving towards something invaluable. I was driving back to myself. The next few hours were a watercolor painting of snowy landscapes and hot, cleansing tears. But they weren't tears of a broken heart. They were tears of mourning for the person I had twisted myself into for him, and tears of a wild, thrilling relief. I found a blessedly anonymous motel off the highway, a room with a rattling heater and a lumpy mattress that felt more luxurious than any Egyptian cotton sheet in that mansion. The next morning, my phone was a war zone of missed calls and texts from Julian. They followed a pathetic, predictable arc. First confusion, "Where did you go? Call me." Then performative concern, "Clara, I'm worried. Please just let me know you're okay." Finally, the inevitable shift to annoyed condescension and blame. "This is a massive overreaction. You're being completely irrational." He tried to frame his family's cruelty as a very dry, British sense of humor and insisted I was being oversensitive. But it was the last text, sent in the dead of night, that calcified my decision into diamond-hard certainty. It read, "You have absolutely no idea what you did to me today. Walking out like that on Christmas in front of my entire family. I have never been so embarrassed in my life." And there it was. Not one word of apology for my pain, not a whisper of regret for his silence, just his wounded pride. I hadn't broken his heart. I had tarnished his image. I had exposed a crack in the flawless Montgomery brand, and for that, my crime was unforgivable. I typed a single reply, "Goodbye, Julian." Then, with a feeling of profound, liberating finality, I blocked his number. I blocked Catherine, Robert, and Victoria. I torched the digital bridge that connected me to their cold, glittering island. Of course, a man like Julian Montgomery doesn't accept rejection. In the weeks that followed, he treated our breakup like a hostile takeover he was determined to win. A forest of long-stemmed roses arrived at my friend's apartment where I was crashing, a gesture so grand and public it felt like another violation. He ambushed me outside my part-time library job. He began calling mutual friends, spinning a narrative of my supposed emotional fragility, hoping they'd persuade me to come to my senses. His pursuit wasn't born of love, it was born of ego. He was a king who couldn't comprehend that one of his subjects had simply abdicated. The final, inevitable confrontation happened 3 weeks later. He cornered me on a busy street as I was leaving a coffee shop, planting himself in my path. "Clara, please," he said, his handsome face a mask of strained sincerity. "Just 5 minutes, that's all I ask." I clutched my purse to my chest like armor. "We have nothing left to talk about." "You're really going to throw away 2 years of your life over one bad afternoon?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine disbelief. "So my family is a little abrasive. It's just how they are. They didn't mean anything by it." I looked at him, and for the first time I saw him clearly, without the filter of my own hope. They mocked a gift I made to honor my dead mother, Julian. They laughed at the most important value she ever gave me, and you sat there and endorsed it with your silence. He raked a hand through his perfect hair, his composure finally cracking. "What was I supposed to do? Start a war on Christmas morning? I was trying to keep the peace." "No," I said, my voice dangerously soft as I stepped around him. "You were trying to have everything. You wanted the power and privilege of their world, and you wanted the peace of my world that you found novel and interesting, but you can't have both. And on Christmas morning, when you had to make a choice, you chose. You chose them, and that's the only truth I ever needed." His face hardened, the faux desperation melting away to reveal the familiar Montgomery steel beneath. "This is ridiculous," he sneered. "You're walking away from a life that millions of women would kill for, all because you got your feelings hurt." I stopped and looked back at him one last time, and all I felt was a profound, aching pity. "No, Julian, I'm walking toward a life that I can actually breathe in. For the first time in a very long time, I'm not managing your feelings or your families. I'm finally honoring mine. Goodbye." I turned and melted into the crowd, and this time he didn't follow. The next year was a joyful reclamation. I found my own little apartment in a noisy, vibrant neighborhood and filled it with mismatched furniture, far too many books, and the constant smell of baking. I rekindled friendships with people who would think a handmade gift was the highest form of love. The following Christmas, I hosted a party in my tiny apartment. We exchanged silly, thoughtful, inexpensive gifts, drank cheap wine, and laughed until we cried. The room was filled with a kind of authentic warmth that a billion-dollar trust fund could never purchase. About a year after that, I was flipping through a magazine at a doctor's office and I saw his face. Julian was engaged again to a woman from a prominent political family, a woman the caption called a perfect and powerful match. They were smiling on a red carpet, two beautiful, flawless specimens. They looked like a matched set of expensive porcelain dolls, perfect, polished, and utterly inanimate. Looking at that photograph, I felt a wave of absolute, unadulterated peace. I was happy for him in a strange way. He had found someone who fit seamlessly into his world, and I was ecstatic for me because I had escaped it. Walking away from that life was the most difficult thing I had ever done. But in losing a fortune, in losing a man who was never truly mine, I had found something far more precious. I had found my own worth, and I wouldn't trade that for all the money in the world.